It's been almost 200 days since we went to the lake, collected some unusual swamp water and plants, and combined everything in the most high-tech aquarium to create a self-sustainable ecosystem. Countless microorganisms, tiny creatures and their larvae made their way into the tank. They grew, hunted and eventually even transformed into flying insects, leaving the aquarium. Later, we introduced a few shrimp and 2 tiny guppy fish, but the most important part was that we never planned to feed them. According to our theory, this aquarium should be capable of producing certain amounts of food and living organisms on its own, allowing the fish to feed naturally without relying on store-bought food at all. Over time, the number of plants in the aquarium kept growing, and the fish noticeably increased in size. Even though many larvae transformed into moths and flew out of the tank, I continued to observe new organisms appearing at the bottom, feeding on decaying plant matter. Our fish were vastly different from typical pet fish in terms of behavior. If you've ever had a fish, you've probably noticed that they immediately swim towards the glass of the water surface when they see a person, expecting to be fed. However, our fish had no concept of feeding time. They grew up in a Spartan condition, where food had to be found rather than given. As a result, they were always in foraging mode, constantly searching for food without paying attention to people or expecting help from others. Despite the fact that the leech was wiping out our snail population, they managed to survive. One day after I added some fresh substrate and decaying plants from the lake, I spotted a massive snail devouring everything around it. Good thing there's only one of them, so it won't multiply into a swarm of giants, I thought. But then I read that snails have both male and female reproductive organs, and in some cases can even fertilize themselves to preserve their population. At one moment, I noticed a small leaf drifting in different directions across the aquarium. Taking a closer look, I saw that this leaf was rolled into a tube, and there was a tiny living creature inside of it. To tell you the truth, I can't imagine how something so small managed to curl a long leaf into such a perfectly shaped even tube and secure it in place, thus creating a tiny armored home for itself. Do you remember these 2 bugs, one of whom held the other hostage and never let it go? Well, they finally made peace and became friends. The criminal released its victim and allowed it to live freely. But unfortunately, the larger bug didn't want to leave his criminal past behind. His next target became the poor red shrimp. I felt so bad for it that I wanted to scold the bug or somehow punish it, but I had no idea how to do it. Now, the other shrimp have to be much more cautious, because real troublemakers have emerged in the aquarium. The fish kept growing, consuming more and more microorganisms, until eventually there were only very few left in the aquarium. But then the fish came up with a new hunting strategy. They would dart near the bottom, stirring up all the sediment and exposing the hidden microorganisms. Suspended in the water, these tiny creatures became defenseless and easy to spot, providing the fish an additional food source. Meanwhile, the giant snail kept getting even bigger, and at times it seemed to attack smaller, weaker snails. I couldn't understand why, as there was still plenty of food in the aquarium for everyone. Another month passed, and the fish had fully matured. Their bodies grew larger and thicker, and their fins developed beautiful vibrant colors. Judging by their appearance, we have a male and a female. That means we might soon have baby fish. Over time, large colonies of bacteria formed beneath the layer of sand in the nutrient-rich soil, breaking down the organic waste that settled there. The activity of these bacteria results in the emission of gases. It resembles the explosion of a small bomb. So next time you see bubbles rising from the surface of a lake, you'll know where they're coming from and won't assume it's just a fish farting. By the way, these gases are flammable, and American fishermen often take advantage of this property on frozen lakes, igniting the trapped gas to create a small heat source to warm themselves, or simply for fun. After another 2 months, the aquarium plants had grown significantly in both size and number. I love how it looks now, as for me, it resembles a true underwater jungle. In addition, the more plants there are, the more living organisms can thrive and reproduce within their ecosystem. However, at times the tiny floating plants on the surface multiply so much that they block the light from above. In a natural lake, their population is normally regulated by ducks that can simply eat them. But since we don't have any ducks in the aquarium, I have to take on that role myself. Since the fish were relentlessly hunting small creatures, their numbers in the aquarium significantly declined. At some point, I came up with the idea to go to the forest, collect dry oak leaves and place them in the aquarium. These leaves would not only serve as food for our tiniest inhabitants, but also provide shelter where they could hide from our guppies. You won't believe it. One day when I approached the aquarium, I saw this. These were actual baby guppies. It turned out that our female had managed to get pregnant and had already given birth. However, I could only see 3 of them. It's possible that the others didn't survive for some reason, as guppies typically give birth to around 10 or even more. Nevertheless, even 3 healthy baby fish is a great result. It proves that fish can not only find enough food to survive, but even reproduce in a wild, self-sustaining aquarium. The only question now is whether there will be enough food for all of them. While observing our giant snail and how much it has grown, I noticed a tiny mussel next to it on the sand. Mussels are not predators and pose no threat to other inhabitants. They extend their siphon, consisting of 2 small tubes out of the sand, and activate an internal pump that draws the water in through one of the tubes and expels it through the other. Essentially, a mussel is a tiny natural filter for the aquarium, and a little extra filtration certainly won't hurt our ecosystem. One day, something terrible happened. I noticed that the male guppy was nowhere to be found. I searched for him for a long time among the plants. Perhaps he fell victim to the leech which has attacked the snails in the previous video. Or maybe the 2 troublemakers were behind this crime. In any case, the good news is that the female wasn't left completely alone. Her quite strong offsprings were with her, and one of them would eventually take the place of her lost mate. And you won't believe this, before the male's disappearance, she managed to get pregnant again and gave birth to another batch of fry, much smaller than their older siblings. I have no idea how many fish are in the aquarium now. Just look at all the amount of plants that have grown in there. The fish swim between them, making it impossible to count them all. The number of snails also kept increasing, and some of them even became covered in moss, probably due to their old age. After our aquarium's water pump broke down, the Chinese manufacturers somehow found out and sent me an identical new one. After a simple replacement, the aquarium became fully operational again. In the next episode, we'll carry out a major cleanup of the aquarium, removing a significant portion of the overgrown plants. This will allow us to see all the inhabitants and finally count the actual number of the fish living there.